we use really detailed customs data for the export of deforestation risk commodities, in this case beef. Right? So we have information about the value, the volume, the contents of each shipment of beef or live cattle from Brazil, and we did it for 2015 to 2017. We link this data with other pieces of information on company assets, so where they operate slaughterhouses, and also where those slaughterhouses are licensed to export to. And what that allows us to do is triangulate the facility, which is the source of every single shipment of beef from Brazil. Now we know the slaughterhouse, but you have to identify, if you want to measure deforestation risk, where the cows came from, and link it to the deforestation in the places where the cattle were raised. To do that, we tie it together with animal movement data and government data on the origin of cattle slaughtered in export-approved slaughterhouses. So what that gives us is the location, the 3,000 municipalities in Brazil where cattle are being raised and deforestation is happening, linked back to the slaughterhouse and ultimately to each individual shipment and country that buys the beef. So in an ideal world, we would map commodities back to the specific farms where deforestation is or is not happening. That simply isn't possible on the scale of a country like Brazil. There are no property-level maps available which can be linked to supply chain data. So what we do is we take a sort of intermediate step where we map supply chains back to districts and municipalities. This was already an enormous increase in resolution over what was available before. It's really revolutionary. That means that we end up calling deforestation risk rather than deforestation. In mapping the risks at the landscape level, we think we capture the real risks of those supply chains in a very accurate way. However, at the end of it, we call it deforestation risk to reflect that we had to aggregate property-level deforestation to the municipal level and linking it to companies. So we mapped 98% of Brazil's beef and live cattle exports for 3 years, from 2015, 2016, and 2017. We identified the origin of the cattle that were ultimately slaughtered and then their beef products exported. So we tracked down the municipalities, the districts where the cattle came from, and linked it to 200 plus companies which export beef from Brazil, and then trace it all the way through to the 150 international markets which buy that beef. Close to a third of Brazilian beef products end up in China and Hong Kong. There's another 20% which goes to major halal markets, so Egypt, Lebanon, UAE, the United Arab Emirates. There's another 12% which goes to the EU, 9% to other countries in Latin America, about 5% to the United States, and the rest to the rest of the world. And in doing so, we identified about 75,000 hectares of deforestation risk linked to beef exports each year. There are more than 200 companies which export beef and live cattle from Brazil. But actually, 3 of those, JBS, Marfrig, and Minerva, cover about 2/3 of exports. And in fact, the sector is even more consolidated than that. Those companies have recently been expanding, buying up rivals. They're linked actually to the top 7 cattle exporting companies, and these together export about 80% of beef products. Trase is different from other initiatives in 4 main ways. First of all, we offering really high-resolution trade data. Previously, if you wanted to know about Brazilian beef exports, you only knew that Brazil was exporting to such and such country. But now we break it down into where in Brazil those exports came from, which companies handle the exports, and which countries buy it. Second, we offer an enormous increase in scope. Right? We map the deforestation risk of supply chains across the entire sector. Third, that information is actor-specific, right? So we name the companies and we name the countries involved, which again is really useful information for decision-making. We are an open access portal. So we want to enable actors wherever you sit in the supply chain to have a common base of information about products, where they come from, what risks are associated with them. And finally, we link that all together. We work together with actors across the supply chain to drive more sustainable commodity production.